Hey guys, welcome to Carnegie Hawk Plays. Again, we're going to be continuing our aspect reviews. So today we are looking at the justice aspect. This is another popular aspect that I think is really powerful, especially in solo play. So let's get right to it. It's got the energy resource that everybody has, so counts for 2 when you're playing a justice card. I think this is one of the best double energy cards out there. So a lot of the cards in justice cost more than 1. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 cards that could benefit from this double energy. So that's a ton of cards that you can get value for this from. So let's get into the cards. We'll look at the upgrades first again. One upgrade in this setup, so you can play it under any player's control. In protection, it only costs 1 for that upgrade, but here you get +1 thwart. So it costs 2, and it has a lightning bolt resource. I think thwart is a lot more valuable than defense, which is why it costs 2. And it really shows when you play this on a hero and you can remove 3 threat or more when exhausting your hero to thwart. That's really, really powerful. Think about Rhino in solo play. He only has to get to 7 threat to threat you out. So really, really powerful. Really good upgrade. I would run more than 1 in multiplayer just because giving this to another teammate or ally is really powerful. Alright. Let's look at the supports next. There's 2 supports. Surveillance team, it's kind of like med team. You put 3 counters onto it. Once per turn you can exhaust this to remove a threat from the scheme. So you're paying 2 to remove 3 threat. Here you're paying 2, and if you thwart 3 times you remove the same amount of threat. So I guess I should say that this is pretty good, but I never feel like it's a really good deal. Removing 1 threat never feels like a huge play during a turn versus something much bigger. Still a pretty good card. I think it'll be used a lot in the beginning of the game as people are getting used to things, but there are definitely better cards in Justice and the hero decks for controlling threat. Next is Interrogation Room. I think this is a pretty good card. Some people might say that this is win more. So it's a response after you defeat a villain, exhaust Interrogation Room to remove 1 threat from a scheme. So it's still only removing 1 threat. But it only costs 1, and it's not capped at only 3 uses, so you could use this every round if you keep getting minions played on you. Like against Ultron, this card really shines. Basically, defeating an Ultron drone not only removes attack from Ultron, but it also removes a threat from the scheme, which is really, really cool. The reason I say it could be win more is you're kind of getting a bonus for something that you should already be doing to keep the game under control, but at the same time, Justice doesn't focus on aggression, so it's a lot harder for you to defeat minions. You're using your allies and using your hero to deal that damage to kill the minion, so it kind of balances it out a little bit. Next we'll look at the 2 events. Great Responsibility costs 0. I usually love 0 cost events, and this one is no different. When any amount of threat be placed on the scheme, you can take it as damage instead. So our good old friend Gamma Slam loves this. If you're playing Justice She-Hulk, let's say the villain, flips a pip to, or flips a encounter card to scheme for 5 or something, you can be like, no problem, I'll just take 5 damage. And the next turn, I'll throw it back at your face, which seems like a fair trade. You avoided 5 threat, did 5 damage, and you took a little bit of a penalty. So I think this is a really powerful card. Unfortunately, it's another one of those cards that you kind of hold on to turn after turn because you're waiting for a good opportunity to play it. I guess Call to Action is kind of like that too, but when I see Call to Action and there's no allies in my discard pile, I just pitch it and use it for resources. And this is sort of the same thing. If you're holding this for more than a couple rounds because the villain keeps only scheming for 1, you may as well just play it or use it as a resource because you'll get to another copy in your deck eventually. The next card, this is one of the MVP cards for Justice, for the Justice aspect, and it's called For Justice. So it's a hero action, you can't be confused, you have to be able to thwart. It's remove 3 threat from a scheme. So here you're paying 2 to remove 3 threat over 3 turns. Here you're paying 2 to remove 3 threat immediately. And if you pay with a mental resource, that's 4 threat. So we'll compare this again. We talked about this in the leadership video. Maria Hill's a very similar card, and someone brought up in the comments that it's going to be a lot less frequent that you remove 4 threat with Maria Hill in 1 turn, and that takes an extra card. And I completely agree. If you need to remove 4 threat in 1 turn, For Justice is the card to go for. But if you can spread that out over 2 turns even, Maria Hill is really versatile and can get you a bonus on top of that 4 threat removal. You don't have to pay with any specific type of resource to get Maria Hill's thwart out there, and you get this bonus card that you draw back. So I feel like that's really powerful. That doesn't take anything away from 4 Justice. I think 4 Justice is game-saving in that Rhino game. It's 7 threat until he threats out, which is not very well. Opening pop-up windows everywhere. 4 threat or 7 threat until he threats out, which is not very much. So if you can remove 4 of it, you can like ignore threat for half the game and then say, okay, let's reset. That's really, really powerful. 2 allies, like most of the aspects except leadership, Jessica Jones and Daredevil, both very justice-y characters in their own way. So Daredevil, another lawyer, all about justice. After Daredevil thwarts, deal 1 damage to an enemy. He's got 2 thwart, 2 attack, and 3 health for 4 cost, so he'll be around for a while. Thwart is a little more powerful than attack. That's why he's the same cost as Luke Cage, but with less damage, or less consequential health to take. He could still attack or thwart and still deal damage. So you could thwart with him, deal damage to kill an Ultron drone or kill a Hydra bomber or something like that. So that's really powerful. Jessica Jones is also a character that I think is only going to get better as the game goes on. So she gets +1 thwart for each side scheme in play. From what we've seen in the core set, there are a lot of side schemes that can get into play and mixed in, especially when you start playing in expert mode. There's a card in the encounter deck that can just whip out a bunch of side schemes really fast. And if you can get Jessica Jones's thwart up to 3 or 4, she's just going to be removing side schemes left and right. Really good ally to play and then sit on until she's really, really useful. But at the same time, in some of the encounters, there might not be a lot of side schemes. So she's one of those cards that you might slot in depending on what villain you're playing against. I don't like to change my deck for the villains. I like to make a deck and test it against all the villains. So for me, she's more of a situational character, but with the current landscape, all the allies are so important. You're really best off bringing as many allies as you can into the game. So still a really powerful card. So we already talked about 2 cards that benefit or compete with some Justice cards. But let's talk about some other cards that heroes have at their ability to deal with threat, because Justice is all about dealing with threat on the scheme. So first we'll look at Black Panther. Almost every hero has a way to deal with threat. So Black Panther's is one of his upgrades. You can remove 1 threat from a scheme, or 2 if it's the last upgrade that you trigger for that Wakanda Forever play. And this is a really powerful card. I mean, you pay 2 for the upgrade just like you do for this, but then 5 times within the process of 1 pass through your deck, you're removing 1 to 2 threats. So that's like 5 uses of Heroic Intuition without you actually having to spend your turn thwarting, which is really, really powerful. And I expect that. I think the hero cards should be a little bit more powerful than the aspect cards, because the hero cards are specific to only 1 character. So they should really theme and make that character want to be played. Whereas these aspect cards can be mixed with anybody. But I'm just showing you some other things that remove threat. They can either, if you want to really be a control threat removal character in a team, these are the cards you're going to focus on in your hero deck. She-Hulk has 2 cards in her hero deck. Both of them are alter ego cards. So 1 cost support, you can exhaust it and spend a tech resource to remove, or a mental resource to remove 2 threat. So that's pretty good. It's sort of like this, but you have to pay for it each time. So here you pay 2 to remove 3. Here, by the time you've paid 2, you only remove 2. By the time you've paid 3, you remove 4. Whereas, like, to remove 6 with this, you're paying 4. Here, you're paying 4 as well. So pretty even Stevens in how much you're paying, but this one you have to have the right cards in hand to make it work out. Legal practice. Choose a and discard up to 5 cards from your hand, or remove 1 threat from a scheme for each card discarded this way. So this can be really good because it's adjustable to how much ever you want to pay. Discarding a card is a pretty big penalty, so it's something you use when you have a bunch of dead cards in your hand. So you had a bunch of great responsibilities, but the villain keeps not thwarting. Well, we can remove that threat using great responsibility still via legal practice. Spider-Man has a upgrade. He plays it on minions. When the attached minion is defeated, remove 3 threat from the scheme. This is really cool because it can combo with Interrogation Room. So now you defeat a villain and you remove 4 threat from a scheme, or 3 and 1 from a side scheme, or 1 and 3 from the side scheme. So that's a really cool wombo combo for Justice Spider-Man. Crisis Interdiction is from Captain Marvel, so it's a hero action. You remove 2 threat from the scheme. If you have Ariel, you remove another 2 threat from a different scheme. So that's kind of cool. It deals with like the side scheming stuff. It doesn't jam really well with Jessica Jones because you want those side schemes out there, but it's a really good threat removal card. And here we can like really look at the value of For Justice. So here you can remove 2. If you have this 1 upgrade in play, you can remove 2 from a different scheme. But For Justice, you can just remove 4 from something. So if you are really having trouble with the main scheme, you can spend 2 in For Justice, and it's a lot better than Crisis Interdiction. Fighting Iron Man, he's got an upgrade as well, so you exhaust it to remove 1 threat from a scheme if you have the aerial trait from each scheme. So it's sort of like a Piddledink remover compared to most of the other removal we have in Justice and our heroes, but it's still some threat mitigation that you can get from your hero. So Justice is a great aspect. It can really force a character into a control-ish role, and each of the 5 heroes in the core set has a way to augment this set, which is one of the reasons it makes Justice really powerful. You can really define your role at a team, or really slow the villain down to the point that you have time to ramp up with your hero cards and start dealing damage. The one thing you'll notice in Justice is there's not a lot of ways to do damage. So it doesn't do damage, doesn't do damage. I mean, like all of this doesn't do damage. Jessica Jones could do damage, but she's meant for thwarting. Daredevil does damage when he thwarts, so you get a little bit of damage in there, but you're really going to be relying on your hero deck to do as much damage as you can, as quickly as you can. So we've got one more aspect to go. Tune in tomorrow, and we will go through Aggression.